It's been 10 years. I've lived in the city 10 years. At the time of recording this, it's early July 2025. I moved into the city in early July 2015. I'm not from Toronto originally, but 10 years feels like a pretty healthy enough time to say that, Toronto is my home, and I certainly have no plans of going anywhere. So what I want to do is I want to make a video sharing with you 10 solid lessons that I've learned over the 10 years of having lived here. These aren't factoids. These are lessons learned by being an adopted, Torontonian. So the first thing that I learned, I would say somewhat more recently, is that Toronto can be a great place to raise a family. There's lots of green space, more on that after. There are great schools everywhere. You can still kind of achieve some of the stuff that you get from being in a small town. Like if your kids want to, and mine aren't quite at this age, but I know other people who have kids of this age where they can run out the front door and run 3 doors down to their friend's place, or hop on the bike and ride down the street to go to the closest park or whatever. Like you can still achieve some of that kind of small town stuff because you're still living within a community within the city. There are tons of playgrounds. There's tons of things to do. We have one of the best children's hospitals in the world with sick kids. There's all kinds of fantastic reasons why Toronto, I feel, can be a really great place to have and to raise a family. Lesson number 2, which I alluded to in lesson number 1, is that there is way more green space in the city than you would think. Coming from outside of the city, I would have thought that it would have been like relatively parkless, not a lot of trees, all that kind of stuff. Toronto, and I admit I don't know what the green space is kind of coverage-wise compared to other major cities in North America or the world, but Toronto definitely has a ton of outdoor space. There's the Don Valley system, so you've got all kinds of trails and parks and different stuff kind of connected to that. Just parks themselves. High Park is a massive park that's got all kinds of different things going on there. There's like a little petting zoo, and there's a small little amphitheater, and there's the cherry trees in the spring. There is so much more than I would have thought. I was talking with a friend of mine who is Brazilian, and she came here from Rio, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, something like that. And she said, compared to Rio, it's not even close. Now, mind you, Rio is a much more densely populated city, so it's not necessarily a fair comparison. But, I was talking to her about this because she also is kind of an adopted Torontonian. And that was one of the things that I mentioned to her. And she was like, oh, for sure. There was just so much outdoor space and green space in the city. So that's a huge positive that I wasn't expecting. Lesson number 3, the traffic really does suck. So we've heard about it in the news, you've seen it on social media, but living here and having a career where I'm pretty reliant on my car, you get very intimate with traffic patterns, and it's tough at times. I do my best to kind of avoid setting appointments at 8:30 to 9-ish o'clock and 4:30 to 5:30. Sometimes you can't help it, but I was coming from places and grew up in places where if you were driving for 30 minutes, you could get pretty far. The place I was living before Toronto was Alliston, which is a small town near Barrie. If you drive for 30 minutes, you can get to Barrie, which is like dozens of kilometers away. You can drive for 30 minutes and still be in Toronto, and that's when traffic is half decent. So whatever you hear about the traffic, it's all true. Lesson number 4, summers, holiday periods, Christmas, March break, and long weekends are fantastic times to be in the city. People leave. I'm not anti-people. It's not like I don't want to be around people. I'm very extroverted, but the roads kind of thin out and clear out. You can get around much easier. Some of the stuff that you might do on a regular basis on the weekends or during the holidays are not nearly as busy as they could be. Part of the issue with Toronto and I'm sure all densely populated cities is that there's not enough stuff per capita. So there's just tons of people that need to use the grocery store or go to the ROM or, whatever the case is. At times where the city kind of settles down, it's really great. Now, that doesn't mean that things can't be busy during the summer or, certain holiday periods. Like, especially in the summer, you go to like a festival, like a street festival, or you go to, something. It's still going to be very, very busy. But for the most part, it's a much more kind of calm, cool, relaxed vibe in the city at times when people traditionally are traveling or leaving Toronto. Lesson number 5, something that I learned after having moved to the city I didn't know before. People in Toronto love lining up for things, either new things or popular things or new popular things. Kind of doesn't matter. You will see lineups for stuff all over the place, and for things that you probably don't need to line up for, at least at that time. It almost seems like it's like maybe a rite of passage, or you do it for bragging rights. I was there on opening day and I waited 2 hours to get the slice of pizza from, the new place that kind of moved up here from the States. Shake Shack, or like Uncle Tetsu's Japanese cheesecake. That place was lined up down the street for months when they first opened. I've had the cheesecake. I love cheesecake. not worth it. And the cool thing about Toronto is that if there's something new or really great, very fashionable, whatever, that has a constant lineup, I can almost guarantee you that there's something just as good, maybe better, nearby that doesn't have a lineup, and you can just go there instead. Lesson number 6, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, your ethnicity, your cultural background, your hobbies and interests, there is a community in Toronto for you. There are neighborhoods that are just based on, again, cultural backgrounds and ethnicities. For example, Midtown, Yonge and Eglinton, Davisville has a huge Brazilian community. Just to use that as an example, talking about my Brazilian friend before. This was another topic that came up. She said, when I moved here, I didn't know anybody, but there were tons of Brazilians, especially in certain pockets of the city, and it made her feel much more comfortable and helped her get adjusted to the city very quickly. For myself, I moved to the city in 2015. I love playing hockey. I didn't really know anybody in the city who played hockey. I said to my wife, what am I going to do? She said, sign up as an individual for a league at the closest rink to us. We were living at Yonge and Eglinton at the time. And so I did that. And I was put together with a bunch of other guys that signed up as individuals. And so we were like the team made up of all guys who didn't know each other. And here I am 10 years later, and I was just out for beers the other night with 5 or 6 of those guys and still playing hockey with those guys. No matter what you do, no matter what interests you or whatever, you'll be able to find a community that'll help you feel welcomed in Toronto. Lesson number 7, this is something that I never thought of until I moved to the city, and I don't think it's just because of my profession being a realtor. If you're going to be driving somewhere, plan for your parking situation if you're going out. This is something that I wasn't used to. I had to know where I was going, when we were going there, first of all, to kind of map out routes and that kind of stuff. Now you can rely on GPS, but 10 years ago, maybe not quite as robust. But then once you got there, where the heck was I going to park? And how much was it going to cost? And could I find a cheaper alternative that wasn't too much of a compromise in terms of where it was located and where I needed to end up? Talking to another friend of mine the other night, and he's not a realtor, and he's like, man, that stresses me out when I need to look at, okay, where am I going to park when I get there? So that's a big one, very important lesson that I'm happy to pass along. Lesson number 8, there is plenty to do in the city, even if you're broke. This kind of catch-22 with Toronto is that the jobs are all here. If you don't have to work remote and you have to be in the city, then this place makes sense for a lot of people for employment. The catch is that living in the city is very expensive. The cost of living is quite high. So you can live in the city and have a decent job, but still not have a ton of disposable income. You won't be bored. You will be able to find all kinds of things to do. There's free concerts, and I mentioned the amazing outdoor space that we have, hanging out in Maple Leaf Square outside when there's a Leaf game on. You don't have to be in the arena that's costing you hundreds of dollars to get a ticket. There's tons to do, all free, and you don't have to have a ton of disposable income to have a great time in Toronto. Lesson number 9, the food and entertainment, particularly music scene in Toronto, is top-notch. And this might not be different from other major cities around the world or major North American cities, but it's certainly very true about Toronto. And the thing about Canada is that we don't have many major cities. So I think it's a really relevant point, especially for people who are moving here from within the country and not necessarily another major city. From Michelin star restaurants to amazing hole-in-the-wall places where you don't expect to be having the best shawarma in your life. As far as music venues go, big venues, small venues, ones that have tons of history and have housed some really incredible shows with huge bands where they were like secret shows that you never knew about. So the food and the music scene here in Toronto is one that you'll definitely want to try and take advantage of. You can, because it is something not to miss for sure. Last one, probably won't come as a shock. The transit system, particularly the subway, very unreliable, unfortunately. We have such little amount of the city that's kind of covered by lines, and you really only have 2 major lines. So you've got the Yonge University line that is kind of a U shape that goes downtown and kind of culminates at Union Station, and then you've got the Bloor line that goes east-west. We're going to get the Eglinton line pretty soon, but that's just another kind of east-west line that isn't crazy densely populated quite yet, but the TTC is very unreliable, and you hear about it, but then when you move here, it becomes more of a reality. So I am thankful that I'm not reliant on it for my job, because I just need so much more flexibility and I need to use my car, period, full stop. Lots of people learn this lesson that like you need to plan ahead. You need to make sure that you're aware of when there are closures. You need to schedule extra time. It probably means getting to work a little bit earlier than you thought you needed to because you planned for a delay and that delay didn't happen. And so you're able to get where you're going in the regular amount of time, which means early. Not necessarily a horrible thing, but if you're one of those people, kind of like me, who likes to time things kind of perfectly so you don't waste any time, it can be really tricky if you're relying on the TTC. So that's it. I hope you found those helpful. If you're planning on moving to the city and you're a bit unfamiliar with Toronto, even if you're coming from another major city, some of those things might have been eye-opening or new for you. So I certainly am happy to kind of share that wisdom, for lack of a better word. If you found this video helpful, I would be thrilled if you would like it, if you would subscribe to the channel. And I would also love to hear, maybe even from current Torontonians, if you're watching this, what kind of lessons have you learned living in the city? And if you're moving here from somewhere else, I'd love to hear what kinds of things that you're curious about. I'll read those comments. I'd be happy to respond to kind of give you a heads up on some things that you might be curious about the city.